spoiler warning here right off the bat. I'm going to be talking full spoilers for Season 1 of Sonic Prime here, so if you haven't watched it, maybe don't watch this until you've seen it, or if you just don't care. To avoid copyright issues, I'm just going to be using screenshots here. Sorry about that, but it's the best I can do. And just to be clear here, this is not a story of Sonic Prime video. I'm not going to be breaking down everything that happens throughout the story. I'm just going to be talking about my thoughts of the show. You know, the story isn't done, because Netflix is doing that stupid thing where they take a show and they break it up into multiple pieces instead of just releasing the whole thing at once. Like, yeah, they say that it's Season 1, but, like, this is not a season. The story is just stops at the end of the 8th episode, and then it just, alright, wait for more, I guess. Apparently, Netflix ordered 24 episodes for Sonic Prime, so that means there's gonna be 2 more drops of episodes in the future. So really, we've only watched the first third of the show, and I certainly don't feel it's appropriate to review something when you're only a third into it. So this isn't a review, it's just me talking about my experience watching Sonic Prime. And overall, I must say that I actually liked it. Quite a bit, in fact, which was extremely surprising to me. Like, oh my god, a new piece of Sonic story media that I actually enjoyed. I never thought I'd see the day. In fact, I didn't just kinda like the show, I actually really enjoyed it quite a bit. Like, when I got to the end of episode 8 and the story just stops, I was like, what the fuck? I was pissed, because I'm like, I want to keep watching the show, because it's really good, and I'm engrossed, and I want to keep going, and there's just no more. This is fucking bullshit, Netflix. And you definitely are doing something right when that is your audience's reaction to not being able to watch more of your show. So now getting into things a little bit more, I guess we'll start with the more surface level things before we talk about the story. Animation-wise, I quite like the show. I think it's pretty good. The animation is not bad. It's actually quite expressive and quite lively. I really liked how the show looked overall. Certainly a huge step up from Sonic Boom. I thought that show was really badly animated for the most part, but this show actually had good animation in it that was actually pleasing to watch. There was actually a bit of style to it that I definitely appreciated. A lot of good use of really nice looking keyframing and a lot of the animation that made it really stand out and be like, huh, this is a good looking show actually. For the most part, the visuals of the show can sometimes be a bit uneven. There are some shots here and there that don't look like they were fully refined like a lot of the other shots. Just certain occasional, you get a thing there where the lighting just looks really primitive and basic and not very good at all, but generally overall the show looked pretty good. Oh yeah, one other thing I didn't like about the show, the characters have visible necks. You can actually see them sometimes in certain shots, and that just looks so extremely bizarre for Sonic characters. Don't give Sonic characters necks. Don't let us see their necks. It just looks weird. And I don't know how I feel about the patterns we can see on the characters, that, like, spiky thing that they're going for. Like, I see what they're trying to do, but it kind of looks a little bit weird, if you ask me. Though, to be honest, it's nice just to have a show where the Sonic characters actually look like the Sonic characters from the games, as opposed to the movies where they look all weird and different, or Sonic Boom that totally redesigned them and made everyone look awful. It's nice to be able to watch a Sonic show and look at Sonic and go, hey look, it's Sonic, instead of some weird altered version of him. Music in the show, honestly, I didn't really notice it too much, but I thought it was generally serviceable for what it was. Voice acting. I generally liked all the voice actors in the show pretty decently. I think everyone did a good job. The only voice that I really don't like is Knuckles' voice. I don't really think that, like, a super deep voice is fitting at all for Knuckles. That just doesn't really match his character, in my opinion. But as far as the quality of the voice acting goes, I really have nothing to complain about. I think everyone did a really good job, and I think generally a lot of the voices match the characters quite well. Anyway, now getting into the real meat of things, the story of Sonic Prime, I was really surprised by it. I actually quite enjoyed the story for the most part, and I like the direction that it's moving in. I mean, obviously this is definitely a kid's show, and it is very kiddie in many ways, overly so in my opinion for Sonic, but okay, fine. it's not really that bad. The show in general, in terms of like tone and execution, to me feels very similar to Clone Wars, where it's a little bit overly leaning towards kids, but at the same time, there is some genuinely good stuff in there, and it does get a lot of the important things right. Because unlike most of the Sonic shows and movies and stuff that we've gotten over the decades, Sonic Prime actually attempts to feel true to the Sonic game series to a degree. I don't know if this is supposed to be canon to the games or not, and quite frankly, I don't give a shit. I'm just looking at this as its own thing. And as its own thing, it's nice to see something that actually feels like the Sonic games, somewhat. I mean, tonally, it's still very much like a typical kids action-adventure cartoon, like the tone and lots of the comedy and juvenile dialogue and writing. It's definitely still very kiddie, and it really doesn't match the style of, you know, Sonic storytelling from things like the adventure games or Sonic Unleashed or whatever. And personally, I'm just never a fan of that with Sonic. I don't think we need to have, like, a lighthearted, comedic, jokey tone with Sonic. I really don't think that's necessary. But this is just how things are nowadays. If it's for kids, then you gotta shove in that Marvel-esque humor. It's just inevitable, unfortunately. So taking that and just putting up with it, what I found was interesting about Sonic Prime is that within the limitations of making a generic kids action-adventure show, they actually did a pretty good job at being true to Sonic in many ways. And I don't just mean like the surface level, it has the characters and they look like how they are and blah blah. I mean that, like, it actually gets across some of the spirit of what Sonic is about, some of the themes, some of the things that the Sonic series actually tries to do story-wise is actually present here in Sonic Prime, which totally blew me away. I was not at all expecting that. Like, even the initial premise of the show, it's like the exact same thing that we've seen overused in so many Sonic games. Eggman discovered some mystical, mysterious thing, and he tries to claim that power for himself, and that's what sets the entire thing in motion. You know, the Paradox Prism, and him discovering that, trying to get access to it, trying to take it. It's just like so many Sonic games. He discovers Chaos, he discovers Shadow, blah blah blah. And I also really like the fact that Sonic Prime is not like a slice-of-life episodic-style show like most Sonic cartoons in the past have been. This is actually a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and every episode is pushing that story forward, which I really like, because it makes it feel more like the kind of story that we would see in a Sonic game. We have this problem that is initiated by the whole inciting incident, and now the entire story, the entire adventure that Sonic goes on is dedicated to fixing this problem. It's just like what we would see in a Sonic game, and I really like that. Even visually, I think they managed to land things pretty well and make it feel authentic to Sonic. Green Hill, while being fairly primitive looking, does feel like how I think the Sonic series should look generally. And I really like the look of New York City. It looks a lot like Eggman Land from Sonic Unleashed, which I wonder if that was intentional. I imagine probably not, it's just coincidental, I think. But I do like that, because, you know, it creates some consistency there of, like, when Eggman wins and he takes over, this is what the world under his control looks like. This drab world, lots of grays, metallic, rusted brown all over the place, a dreary, red, overcast sky all the time. It really works pretty well, and that whole thing really feeds into the themes of Sonic, the whole environmentalism and stuff. Yeah, it's just like, oh, Eggman took over the world, but they actually do go out of their way to highlight the environmental damage that Eggman has caused. It's a little on the nose, but Sonic talks about, oh no, the palm trees and the rolling green hills and the grass and the beautiful sunlight. It's all gone, replaced with all this metal and machinery and technology everywhere. It's horrible. Very, very in your face, but I like that they're still at least acknowledging that. And then we see the whole rebellion, and the thing that they use as their beacon of hope is the last remaining palm tree, the last remnant of the beautiful natural world that they should be living in. And they want to try to reclaim that nature. Like, it's like, okay, this is like actual Sonic stuff. I'm surprised to see these themes interwoven into the story here. That's pretty cool. And then, after we finish all the New York City stuff, I was even further surprised to see that we continue with these environmental themes with the next world we go to, where it's the primitive stuff, where we have the Amy character, Rouge, and she is like a super crazy, off-the-edge environmentalist. You know, she sees all of her friends that are taking from the environment, and they're not giving back to it, and they're over time hurting it. It's like the very, very beginning of society and people exploiting the environment and harming the world. And here, in this alternate universe, we have someone immediately at the very beginning of everything stopping it before it even can begin. But in this case, they're actually taking it too far. They're going too far in the environmental direction at the detriment of people's ability to survive and live. It's now the inverted theme where, yeah, worrying about the environment is important, but we can't go crazy with it. We can't go too far. We need to strike that balance. That's some fucking Sonic X Season 3 shit with the Meta-Rex, and it's the same kind of stuff we also see in the good futures of Sonic CD. Nature and people finding a way to live together. And I was like, oh my god, why is this Sonic show actually, like, touching on topics that are actually true to the Sonic series? What's happening here? This is actually, like, pretty good. But then even further they manage to be true to the series because we have Sonic come into this world and he manages to help Rouge realize that she's going too far with these things and realize that there is a problem, a conflict between these two groups that is ruining everything, and he helps to bridge that gap and make everyone see the error of their ways and come back together again. And it's like, oh my god, Sonic's doing the Sonic thing. He's helping people through their problems and improving things. And like, what? It's like Sonic the Hedgehog. I can't believe it. Even though the tone and writing style and general execution of Sonic Prime is very, very different than what I think the traditional Sonic storytelling should be or typically is in the games, it still manages to hold true to a lot of those important core Sonic ideas, which I was really shocked to see. Honestly, I'm willing to admit that maybe part of the reason I enjoyed Sonic Prime so much is just the whiplash of it, because I'm so used to these days having Sonic stories that I really do not get on with, as they're really barely even Sonic stories. They just use the IP for whatever. And so actually getting a Sonic story that in certain important ways actually feels like a Sonic story, it makes it seem like this is the greatest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, I'm just exaggerating there, but I was definitely really elated to see a Sonic thing that actually felt like a Sonic thing. Bravo to the people that were working on this show. They seem to maybe actually do some research and actually learn what the heck Sonic the Hedgehog is actually about. Getting more into specifics of Sonic Prime and what actually happens throughout it, one thing that I found very amusing in the first episode is how quickly the show tries to get you up to speed with Sonic if you're not familiar with the series. You know, we have that narration by Sonic where he's like, alright, I'm Sonic, I'm super fast, that's Eggman, those are my friends, that's Shadow, it's complicated, blah 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 blah. We try to get through everything really, really quickly. And then he gets to the cave and he's fighting with all of his friends, and each one of them has a little interaction with Sonic to try to introduce that character to us so we know who they are. Like, oh, hey, Tails, what's up? You're my best bud, and you have the technology, and oh, Knuckles, let's beat some dudes up, and blah, blah, blah. Like, we really try to shove in as much of what Sonic is as quickly as possible into the intro of the show for people that don't know what the heck Sonic is to try to catch them up to speed, which was just really amusing to me. I see right through that kind of thing, and I see, like, the intentions of what was going on behind the scenes of, like, okay, we need to explain all this stuff to people that don't know what Sonic is, but at the same time, we don't want to spend too much time on it, we just want to get into things, so just rush through it really, really quickly. It was very amusing to me, but honestly, I don't really think it was adequate at all. Like, watching the show, I couldn't help but think at so many points that if you're not already familiar with the Sonic series, you're gonna have no fucking idea what certain things are. Like, Shadow, when he's introduced, he gets a Chaos Emerald and he does Chaos Control, and to Sonic fans, it's like, obviously, of course, but to anyone who doesn't know, they have no idea what that is, or what Shadow is doing, or what the fuck is happening. There's a lot of stuff in this show that really makes me feel like it was definitely primarily targeted toward, like, Sonic fans, and if you're not really familiar with Sonic, you'll pick it up eventually, I guess, good enough. Which, honestly, I'm perfectly okay with, though I can definitely imagine for non-Sonic fans, certain things might seem confusing at certain points. And then we have the whole Shatterverse concept, and going into Sonic Prime, I was really not looking forward to this whole premise of the show, that we're, like, going to different Sonic universes and stuff, because I am so fucking sick of shit about going to different universes and stuff. Fucking Spider-Verse was the worst goddamn thing that ever happened, because ever since that, everyone is trying to do the fucking multiverse crap, and I'm so sick of it. I never want to see a fucking character interact with an alternate version of themselves ever again. I'm so done with that. However, I will give Sonic Prime some credit because it does things pretty differently to other shows, because in reality, this isn't a multiverse. There is the one Sonic universe that we have at the beginning of this show that gets split into multiple pieces. You can very clearly tell that's what's going on here. That's why in all these different universes, there's no other Sonic or Shadow, because they were outside of the big event that ripped everything apart. So all of these alternate versions of these characters that we're meeting throughout this show, this isn't alternate universe versions of these characters. These are the main Sonic characters that we know that have been fractured into many different versions of themselves. That especially comes across with Amy and what they do with Thorn Rose, how she kind of loses herself, and it's through Amy's own words that Sonic reiterates that Thorn Rose is able to realize what she's doing wrong. It's helping this part of Amy that has strayed away from who she really is realize what the real Amy is like. You can also see that in the moment when Rusty and Black Rose see each other, and, you know, it's two Amy's seeing each other, and for a moment, Rusty actually acts good, where instead of attacking the good guys, she decides to just leave them be. Obviously, the thing there is seeing another version of herself made Rusty, you know, kind of revert back to how she was before she was transformed, but also it's like that connection, those two parts of Amy seeing each other, interacting with each other, it's like these parts of Amy are starting to come back together. And I imagine ultimately that's where the show is leading. We're going to have all these different versions of these characters come together to recoalesce into their original characters once again. And I am all for that because I think that it's been really well done. Each of the worlds has been focused on a different one of Sonic's friends. In New York City, we focused on Tails through 9. In the Primitive world, we focused on Amy through Thorn Rose. And in the Pirate world, we focused on Knuckles through Captain Dread. And through all these adventures and their interactions with Sonic, these characters, these disparate pieces of the main Sonic characters that we know, they're starting to come back to the real characters they're supposed to be. And I think that works really well. Sonic is helping his friends that have lost their way come back together. That is perfectly appropriate for Sonic. I really dig it, if that's the direction the show is going, which I suspect it is. If I were to guess, there's probably only one more alternate world that we've yet to see, which is the one where we're going to focus on Rouge that we're probably going to get in Season 2, because there are 5 Eggman characters, you know, the Chaos Council, who are all concentrated in New York City, and I think that that has to do with the fact that Eggman was in contact with the prism when it exploded, or he was very close to it, whatever. Something happened there where the 5 pieces of Eggman, for some reason, all ended up in the same world as opposed to being spread out like everybody else. Thus, we have the Chaos Council taking over New York City. And so far, we've seen 4 worlds, with New York City, the Primitive world, the Grim, and the Pirate world, so that means we have just one left, if my theory is correct. Now, of course, one interesting thing about this show is Rouge, the fact that she is now being treated as like a main part of the Sonic crew. That is very strange, because that is never how Rouge has been treated ever in any Sonic thing at all. Rouge has always been like a self-interested free agent that is just doing whatever. She's really not like part of the main Sonic group. But, you know, I guess she is for this show. I imagine that's primarily because they wanted to have another female character in the main cast, and so, Rouge, I guess? Which I'm fine with. It's just kind of weird to see Rouge in a role that she normally does not fill. And it's also odd because Shadow is in this show and he's treated as like a total loner doing his own thing, when in reality, Rouge should be hanging out with Shadow, if anybody, but whatever, that's what they're doing with this show. I'm fine with it. Of course, another thing is that they have desexified Rouge, which was the entire point of her character in the first place, but honestly, I don't really give a shit, so whatever. I will say I do like her outfit, by the way. Personally, I feel that Sonic Team really messed up with giving Rouge that same SA2 outfit in so many Sonic games. They had a real opportunity to do something unique with Rouge that would have been nice for her character, because in Sonic Heroes, she has a totally different outfit. And from there, it would have been really nice if in every Sonic game, Rouge had a different outfit that she was wearing. That'd be very appropriate for her character as someone that's really interested in fashion and her looks and all that. So, you know, Sonic Prime, she gets a new outfit. I'm okay with that. I think it works. Let's talk about characterization, everyone's favorite topic when it comes to Sonic story stuff. And as I said, this show is definitely being a very typical kids action-adventure show, so there's a lot of jokes and a lot of humor that's out of place. A lot of the characters doing and saying things that would be out of character if these are supposed to be the same ones as the game characters. But whatever, I'm not really too bothered by that. Again, I'm just looking at this as its own thing. I'm willing to accept the fact that the way that Sonic used to be and the way I think it should be is probably just never going to happen. But within the limitations of what we typically get these days, I think Sonic Prime is pretty decent. I was very happy with how a lot of the characters were portrayed. Like, the reason that Rouge is here in the first place is because she was after the Paradox Prism just because it's a big valuable gem that she wants. There you go, there's some proper Rouge characterization. I can't even fucking remember the last time that they talked about the fact that Rouge likes gems and stuff. She's been relegated to a background nothing character for so long that that part of her character kind of just faded away. The one part of Rouge that did not come back is her flirtatious relationship with Knuckles. They are completely platonic in the very little bit that we get to see of them together, which is not at all surprising that that part of Knuckles and Rouge is dead and buried. I wouldn't imagine we're ever going to see that part of their characters again, ever. Which is unfortunate, because again, that was part of the reason that Rouge was even created as a character in the first place, but it is what it is. Oh yeah, one other thing I did like about Rouge was the attention to detail in how she fights. She is always kicking guys, which is how she originally was back in SA2. As Knuckles' counterpart, he was all about punching, she was all about kicking. Nice to see that the people behind this show actually paid attention to that. Tails is mostly fine in this show, however, they do the thing that they do a lot with Tails nowadays, where he seems completely physically incapable of doing anything. You know, he's always fighting Eggmans with his machinery and robots and stuff. He's never just, like, spin-dashing into guys and stuff like he used to be able to do. I don't know what it is with Tails in modern Sonic stuff where they've decided that he is no longer allowed to do anything physical anymore. You know, he's the brainy, smart character, so he can only do brainy, smart things, even though back in the day, he was just as capable as anyone else, but not anymore. And then we have Amy, which at the beginning of the show, we do see her fighting Eggman robots, which personally, I'm never okay with treating Amy like this. Amy as a character was supposed to be weaker than everybody else. The fact that we just treat her like she's as strong and capable as any of the main Sonic hero characters, I really don't like. It just undermines the very purpose of Amy, and it makes her less unique. You know, it's like, you can't be a main character in Sonic unless you're able to fight. Like, that's a really shitty thing, I think. Amy could be an opportunity to have a main character that is just a normal person that isn't able to help in these kinds of big extravagant ways, but she can help and assist in smaller ways that she is capable of. I think that would be a better use of her character. Kind of like an April O'Neil in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles kind of thing. But no, we have to turn Amy into an action character because girl power or whatever. Which is not something I'm against in Sonic, by the way. There are other female characters perfectly capable of these kinds of things, like Rouge or Blaze, but Amy as a character, it's just not what she was meant to do, and I think she'd be better utilized elsehow, but no one's ever gonna agree with me on that, so whatever. Knuckles is one that I found to be very, very funny, because they actually do go out of their way to mention him being Guardian of the Master Emerald and stuff, but then there's no explanation for why he's not guarding it and why he's just hanging out with everybody in Green Hill, which is exactly what they do in the Sonic games. This show is even endeavoring to emulate the same laziness that we see from Sonic Team. Now, if that ain't true to the series, I don't know what is. Lastly, of course, we have Shadow to talk about, who is kind of hit and miss. He is kind of right in that Shadow is trying to do the right thing, and he's trying to do it in his own way, but he's also very wrong in that Shadow here is treated very similar to how he is in, like, the IDW comics, where for some reason, the modern interpretation of Shadow is that he is a very angry, rage-filled, impulsive character, which is completely backwards to how Shadow is supposed to be. The real Shadow is like a very reserved, calm, controlled, rational character. Like, if you look at the way Shadow behaves in all the Sonic games up to 06, he's very calm most of the time. Shadow doesn't really get very angry almost ever. But nowadays, the modern interpretation of Shadow that they want to go with, for some reason, is grr, angry Shadow. Like, he realizes that Sonic is responsible for what's going on, and for no reason, in a way that would be completely unproductive and achieve nothing, Shadow just wants to beat Sonic up. It makes no fucking sense for his character. One day it would be nice if we got to see the real Shadow in an official Sonic thing again. That would be nice. But I guess this is still better than Sonic Boom's Shadow, which is the most atrocious thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And yeah, of course there is Eggman, but he's in the show so little, and there's not really that much to get from him that you're just like, yeah, he's Eggman, sure, whatever. And Big, he's there as well. And you know what's an interesting thing about this show? The choice of cast is the cast from the Sonic Adventure games. We don't have any characters that were created after Sonic Adventure 2. I wonder if that was an intentional choice on the creators of the show's part. I don't really know, but I find it very suspicious that our cast here is very specifically the cast of the Adventure games and nobody else. Like, not even Metal Sonic, who was a very prominent Sonic character back in the day and today, yet he was absent in the Sonic Adventure games, and he's absent here as well. I guess Orbot and Cubot are in the show, but they're there for, like, one scene, and they're completely pointless. Honestly, I don't even know why they put these characters in the show. Also, another thing that I find amusing about this show is what they've decided to do with Shadow. His role in the story is very funny to me, because I clearly see how this happened. Because kind of a weird thing when you think about it with Shadow these days in Sonic is that he is essentially just superior to Sonic in every single way now. Because he can do everything Sonic can do, he's just as fast as Sonic, but then he also has the Chaos powers on top of that, so he's just like Sonic, but better. And because of that, Shadow is kind of an overpowered character, and so, for this story, to stop him from just solving all the problems more easily than Sonic could, we have to put Shadow in, like, a stasis state where he can't actually do very much. He's, like, stuck on the outskirts of the story, not really able to influence things very much. It's the same fucking thing that they do with Goku all the time in DBZ of, oh, he could just fix the problem, so we need to have him out of the story for a while so the story can happen. But I hope that in future seasons, Shadow will get the chance to be a little bit more involved in what's going on. I highly suspect that's what they're gonna be doing. So that's all the main characters of the Sonic series present in Sonic Prime. However, one thing I like about the show is that the majority of the main Sonic cast is absent for pretty much all of Sonic Prime. Outside of the initial stuff and flashbacks to what happened before the breaking of the Prism, all of our other Sonic characters are totally gone. We instead have these alternate versions of them. The only familiar character that we really have is Sonic. Everyone else is essentially a completely different character, which I really like. Does anyone else get a vibe from this show where it feels exactly like a Sonic storybook game, where Sonic goes into this world and he sees all these characters that look like his friends, but they're not actually his friends? Yet they do have some similarities, and they kind of act like them in certain ways. And we go to all these different worlds where we get all these different characters that are being represented by Sonic characters that we're familiar with. It's exactly like the storybook stuff, and I just thought that was pretty cool and pretty neat. And honestly, I like a lot of these different characters. I actually quite like the Chaos Council, even though I've said that I don't really like the idea of characters working together with alternate versions of themselves. I actually like that in the case of the Chaos Council because it's a bunch of villains, it's a bunch of Eggmans working together. You know, one Eggman is problem enough, but now we have 5 of them that Sonic has to deal with. I think that's actually pretty fun and pretty cool. By the way, nice animation detail they had is at one point I noticed that the main Eggman that's like the most similar to the normal one, he's wearing a toupee. You see it fly off for a brief little moment during one action scene, and then later they do actually make a joke about him wearing a toupee, and it was like, aha, they made a joke about that. I noticed that detail that he's wearing a toupee. That's really fun. And then, of course, we have the splintered versions of all of our main characters, and, there's, like, the minor ones, like Rebel and Nux from New York City, and the 3 from the primitive world outside of Thornrose. All the pirates underneath Captain Dread, and, they're likable enough. Some of them have some funny gags. Like, I liked the Knuckles character in the primitive world, how he was like, I can hear the trees, a very typical kids' humor type joke, but I thought it was effectively done. I found the pirate characters a little bit overly, like, weird, stereotypical pirate characters. Like, that was a little bit much. Also, I noticed a weird thing with the big character in the pirate world. Catfish is his name. He never speaks, and they don't, like, make a thing about that. Like, he's not mute. They don't, like, mention that he can't speak. He just never says anything. So I imagine something probably happened with the production of the show where they couldn't get the voice actor for a period of time, and they just like, I guess he's just not going to say anything. We're just going to have to go with that. Very, very strange thing that was a little bit distracting to me. But obviously, the stars of the show are the main versions of all the alternate characters we have, starting with Nine, who I quite liked Nine. I thought he was an interesting take on Tails. The fact that he's like an alternate version of Tails. If Sonic was never there to inspire Tails to embrace his two tails, then instead he goes on a different path, where he kind of goes a little bit crazy and embraces his technology, and he becomes very lonely and pushes people away, because anytime he's had interactions with people in the past, he's always gotten hurt before. I quite like that, and obviously the whole Nine thing with his 9 robot tails, nine-tailed fox, which is what inspired Tails, I like what's going on there. I was also really surprised to see that they actually represented Tails and Nine's backstory with the backstory that we see in the Sonic Origins cutscenes of Sonic 2. I guess that's what we're going with from now on, which personally I'm not too happy with, because that's just a truncated version of the original Sonic 2 story, and I guess we're just gonna completely ignore the original story, which is unfortunate. One of these days, someone should really tell the story of Sonic 2 properly. That would be pretty cool. Someone should really do that. Someone. Anyway, I quite liked Nine as this main character of this Sonic universe, and obviously his interactions with Sonic are making him open up and start to realize that, hey, you can have friends and all that. It's great stuff, exactly the kind of things I want to see in Sonic, and it works well as like a piece of Tails that has lost his way, that he doesn't even rely on friends anymore, he doesn't even believe in Sonic. Here is him rediscovering that through Sonic's actions. It's so good. And I also like to see that we get to see Sonic teaching the Tails and Knuckles of various worlds how to do spin dashes and stuff, so I guess maybe Tails does still get to do physical stuff. That's nice that they actually remembered that Tails and Knuckles also roll into a ball and all that. That's another thing that is often just completely left to the wayside in modern Sonic stuff, unfortunately. There is also Rusty Rose, and I think she's a pretty interesting character to be like the main enforcer muscle type character for the Chaos Council. Of course, with her being a robot version of a Sonic character with stretchy limbs and enhanced strength, all I can think of is Bunny Rabbit. Was that an intentional nod? I don't know. Probably not, but still, kind of cool to see a similarity like that. And of course, we can all see coming that eventually Rusty is going to break free of the Chaos Council's control and turn into a good guy, and then she's going to be part of the big team-up where everyone defeats the Chaos Council. That's pretty obvious, but if they manage to do it well, then I won't have a problem with it. Also, another interesting thing about the Amy's of this show is that a lot of them have an association with a flicky named Birdie. Is that supposed to be a direct reference to Sonic Adventure? Maybe, but it doesn't match the bird from SA1, so I'm not really sure. And Thornrose is probably my favorite character in the show. I really, really like her a lot because of the arc that she goes on and how Sonic helps her through that, and more importantly, how Amy helps her through that. This is another part where I feel like if you're not already familiar with Amy, then this is gonna not really make sense to you that much, because we don't really see very much of the real Amy in this show, but Sonic talks about how, Amy would help me with this, or in this situation, Amy would say this. And Amy has this whole deal where, the flashback is her doing the surprise present for Sonic, which is the palm tree, and, it's the memories we shared, and Sonic doesn't really understand that at first. And it's when he's trying to get through to Thorn that he realizes what Amy was saying to him there, and he uses Amy's words to help Thorn realize what she's doing wrong. And I think that's awesome. It's like, first of all, we're teaching Sonic a lesson here, but also it's just a really cool thing that we have Amy helping a piece of herself rediscover who she is in a very appropriately Amy way, with her connections and her feelings and her kind nature. That is what Amy is all about. You know, the way that she reaches out to others and tries to connect with them emotionally. And Amy does that for herself in this show while also helping Sonic understand that as well. That is actually quite well done. I was like, damn, that's pretty good. And then, of course, we have Captain Dread, the Knuckles main character that we're going with, and he has this arc of being a coward and not wanting to go after that treasure after last time when he shipwrecked. And it's through Sonic that he re-inspires that courage into Captain Dread. But also, I find it interesting that the whole deal with Captain Dread is that he wants to find treasure. Is that supposed to be alluding to Knuckles being a treasure hunter? Maybe, not exactly sure, but obviously Captain Dread's arc is not done at all, as it's clear that we're gonna come back to the pirate world where Dread is probably gonna be kind of a bit of a bad guy doing some stuff he's not supposed to do until Sonic helps him realize what's up. I'm definitely interested to see where they take Captain Dread in the future and what they're going to do with him. So yeah, the characters of Sonic Prime, I quite like them. I thought they were pretty well done, and overall, I found the plot of the show to be pretty engaging. I found it really interesting how they kind of subverted expectations a little bit, because I thought that for sure I had this show pegged pretty early on, where, okay, we're in New York City for a while, and then Sonic gets the gem, and then he gets transported into the more primitive world, and it's like, okay, so this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to go to each of these worlds, Sonic is going to solve the problem there, get the gem, and then get out to the next world until he collects all the pieces. But then no, after he helps in the primitive world, then he goes back to New York City, and it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, what's going on here? And then we have Nine come in, and he has the Prism Shard, and he's made a machine that allows him to travel in between all the different universes, and it's like, oh, where's this going now? Could this be leading into, like, a thing of, like, oh, we're gonna be traveling back and forth from all these different universes, maybe collecting the main characters like Nine and Thornrose and Captain Dread, and all these characters are gonna go on some sort of universe-spanning adventure? That could be pretty cool if that's the direction we're going in, but then they have Nine and his ship get captured, and I'm like, oh shit, this means that the Chaos Council can become a much bigger threat here. And then when you get to the pirate world and we have that ship come up and it's got all the robots and Rusty Rose there, I was actually like, oh, fuck yeah, dude. They are totally taking advantage of this premise and the things that they've set up here to do some really cool stuff. Now this problem has escalated beyond just like this one universe that the Eggmans control. Now it's starting to turn into they can take over the entire Shatterverse and control all of these worlds, and at that point everything's fucked and Sonic won't be able to put everything back together. We are raising the stakes here now, and I think that is pretty damn cool. I am genuinely really interested to see what happens next in this show, and I wonder, because we already have the Prism Shards as like our main MacGuffins, are we going to get the Chaos Emeralds involved in this show? Are we going to do a supersonic finale? We could, but we could not. I'm not really sure. It could go either way. If I were to guess, if I were to put money on it right now, I would say no. I don't think we're going to see the Chaos Emeralds in this show. That's just my guess, but it feels like the show here is really focusing on these Prism Shards, and that's the main MacGuffin that we're going to be pointing to. I don't imagine that partway through the show we're going to introduce another set of MacGuffins that we have to worry about. I think. We'll see what happens. Let me think. Is there any other last-minute things I want to talk about? Oh yeah, Sonic's, shoe things. How they transform into different things in all the different worlds. I think that's a cool idea. It's very like a video gamey that Sonic gets, like, different power-ups for every single world. Though I gotta say, I think that his shoes in the New York City version look fucking atrocious. I think they're really ugly. And I found it a little bit odd that in the primitive world, Sonic basically gets, like, a bunch of Knuckles shit. Like, he gets claws that let him climb and dig. Like, that's just a little bit weird. But whatever, I guess. I do like how when Sonic has all these different shoes, then the peel-out legs that he does when he's running fast are different colors. I think that's pretty cool. Oh yeah, one last thing that I want to say about this show that I really, really liked is the action scenes, in particular because they're not just fights. One of my biggest problems with the IDW Sonic comics is that there is so much pointless action in those comics where characters are just fighting each other for no reason, and it's just fighting, fighting, fighting every single issue. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, since when has Sonic been a series about fighting? The vast majority of action in a Sonic game is about traversal. It's about getting from one place to another. It's not about fighting. This is not a superhero action fighting series. And Sonic Prime actually managed to get away from that. There are some fights, as there should be, but a lot of the action scenes are actually with different goals in mind. It's not just we're fighting something. It's we have to get somewhere, we have to escape from something, we have to do some kind of thing, we have to talk to somebody, and they're giving us a hard time. There's stuff like that, instead of just, we need to beat up the guys because this is an action series, so we need to have action in every single episode for no reason. The action is more varied and more organic in this show than what you see in something like the IDW comics, which I really appreciated. Again, that's kind of just more of the Whiplash stuff of seeing Sonic action that actually feels more appropriate as opposed to something that just feels shoehorned in there because, I don't know, it's a comic book. Action, characters fight each other, I guess. Yeah, to be honest, I am very, very grateful that Ian Flynn did not work on Sonic Prime. I'm really not a fan of how he handles the series. To be honest, I would be totally down with the people that were responsible for this show taking over in terms of the future of Sonic storytelling. This is a direction that, while I don't 100% love it, I think that it gets a lot of the important things right, and I definitely prefer it to the stuff we've been getting in the past several years for Sonic storytelling media. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Overall, I think the show is probably just, like, okay. I don't think it's probably an amazing show. Like, if you're not a Sonic fan, I don't really think you're gonna be blown away by this show at all. But for Sonic fans, there definitely is some extra stuff to appreciate here that I think makes it worth watching. And I do think the show is good, and the fact that it just manages to be true to Sonic in so many ways, that's just the icing on top. So, Sonic Prime, I can't believe I'm saying it, but it gets my stamp of approval. I'm probably not going to be doing a video again for Season 2 when that comes out. I'm probably going to wait until the full series is out and then do a bigger, more full series breakdown of the whole thing, most likely. So, until then, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.